SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Want to cut your heating costs this season? With a highly efficient York heating and air conditioning system, you can save up to 50% in energy costs while enjoying tax credits and TVA energy rebates as much as $3,000. Your local York dealer. Visit harbonair.com to schedule a free evaluation of your system.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. Middays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Middays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Hump Day.
Well, welcome back, Rhino. Good to have you with us today. I trust you had an enjoyable and relaxing extended weekend there.
Oh, yeah. I completely unplugged from politics for the majority of the time. I had old soccer matches on every single screen I could put up. And we are now 15 days away from the World Cup. So,
it's big time.
Yeah, if I start ignoring politics in the next 2 weeks, this is your warning. It's the World Cup, and it's the World Cup in America. I don't give a rat's rear end about D's and R's and I's and votes and all this gerrymandering crap. I don't give a rip. It's soccer time.
I love it. Well, it is a big deal for the World Cup to be stateside. No doubt about it. Now, last I checked, there was some grousing about the price of the tickets. What's that looking like these days?
Yeah, there's been some upset parties, we'll say,
okay,
at the price of the tickets to the matches and especially the price of hotels in the host cities. And then last week it came out that FIFA, the governing body of international soccer, was calling a bunch of hotels in these host cities and canceling reservations they'd made because they were hoping to drive up the prices to make it look like there was a lot of demand.
Yeah.
Because they were using the same playbook they use for every other World Cup, not realizing this is America. We love big sporting events.
100% right.
So instead of artificially inflating the demand on the hotel rooms to make the hotel people some money, they just ticked off a whole bunch of people.
Well, that apparently is what's going on, but you know what? The market will speak. That's the reality of this. It's a big deal to have it stateside. It is a popular attraction, to say the least. It's, soccer's not at the level, of course, in this country. It is in the European countries, South American countries, Mexico, etc. But it's still a pretty dang big deal, especially when you look at global competition. That really piques the interest. So my expectation is, Rhino, a lot of people who aren't the soccer fan you are, for example, the aficionado, are going to tune in and be tracking this, don't you think? That maybe first time.
Oh, yeah. The World Cup is the one time where even the most stick-in-the-mud, soccer's for commies, dyed-in-the-wool, I hate soccer people can set that aside and get behind the patriotism and the nationalism of cheering for a team made up of your fellow citizens.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's so there will be, I think, intensified interest because it's in this country that the event's happening here. I think that will draw more to it. Yesterday, of course, the big United States Senate Republican primary runoff in the Lone Star State of Texas. And a bit of a shocker from this perspective. It was, of course, won by Attorney General Ken Paxton. He was challenging the incumbent, John Cornyn, whom I believe has been there 28 years, if I'm not mistaken, in the United States Senate. And he took it pretty significantly. Really a little bit shocking that he was able to come away with 63% of the votes versus 36%. I was a bit shocked by that. Now, what also was somewhat shocking / disappointing was the number of votes, the turnout. Man, why are people just not wanting to get out and vote? I don't know if you saw that, but...
Because they don't agree with what Cornyn's done in the last 8 to 10 years, and they didn't really care for Paxton.
I think you're right. It was two relatively unpopular candidates. I'm convinced of that as well, now that you mention it. But if I'm looking at this right, a total of 1.3 and change million votes? I look at that right. I mean, I'm saying that because I looked at the number registered in Texas, and there are total registered 17.5. It's about half and half, so let's just assume it's half Republican. Well, that's 8 million voters. And the best we could get was 20%. I guess that's kind of lines up with what we had here in the U.S. Senate race, right? 16% turned out for our primary, for the Senate primary that held in March, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. So, I don't know. That just was shocking, how low the voter turnout was. You wouldn't think in a state that's as populous as Texas that it would be that low. And especially one where this is a huge office, honestly. This is a big, high-profile deal. So Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, will advance to the general election. He will, of course, take on the Democrat nominee, James Tallarico, wacko of all time. Now, might this be a race where we'll see $1 billion invested in the general election here? Already, haven't seen the data showing the amount spent on the runoff. And, of course, there was not a Democrat runoff. Tallarico won that outright in the primary. But I bet we're bumping it to $250 million total invested through the runoff here. But between now and November, at least $500 million will be spent. That's what I'm thinking.
For all parties?
For all parties, yeah. I'm not talking about a single party.
Because the Republicans, Cornyn spent about $100 million, and Paxton spent 20, 30.
Yeah, that's right.
Like Cornyn way overspent Paxton and still got beat handily.
Well, he got, and this is, I think, what aggravates people about politics. He got the party money and all the so-called establishment that wanted to see their boy continue. And I don't mean that in a derogative way, but there's this connection to the incumbent. In the National Senate Republican, the PAC there, they pretty much tell you, yep, we only support incumbents. And so this ruffled some feathers in the United States Senate because the president came out, and once he put his fingerprint on this race and endorsed Ken Paxton, pretty much was over at that point. I just didn't expect it to be this lopsided. That's what shocked me. Not that Paxton won, but that he won by such a significant margin. And he lapped him, as a matter of fact, when you look at the numbers. But then again, just not much turnout. And looking at the Texas map, it looks like that Cornyn, he carried one county. One county. And that down in the southeastern part of the state, 3 counties up from the border with Mexico, so south of Corpus Christi, way down. in the boot there. So just a bit shocked, honestly, at the turnout, and it was Kennedy County. Am I looking at this right, Rhino? This says 6 votes to 2 in this rural county.
It's a possibility.
6 to 2. What? In a county in Texas? And look, I'm looking at the New York Times, who has excellent, regardless of what you think about the New York Times and their opinion, excellent elections coverage for any race in the country every time. That's kind of their hallmark. That's their calling card. But this says 6 to 2, 8 total votes, with 95% in estimated. That just blows me away. 6 to 2. How many people live in that county? We may have to look at that. We thought we had some counties in Mississippi that were sparsely populated. I don't know that we've ever had that. Yeah, it's down at the very bottom. Kennedy County, 8 votes in. Gee whiz. And look, looking up the list, there's about 7 or 8 other counties that are below 100. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio. It's Caleb Sailors at 11:20. Commissioner Andy Gipson at 12:05.
Hello.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
If your paycheck depends on the weather and the clock.
Well, since we're talking about Texas, I think that's apropos. You gotta have a little twang. We're back with you in the Element Well studio on the C Spire text line, talking about this shot heard around the world. Really, it's not even shocking anymore, because this would be the second big, powerful Republican senator incumbent. Just doesn't happen very much, right? 85% of the time, historically, incumbents win, especially if they've been there as long as those two gentlemen have. Talking about Cassidy in Louisiana, went down 2 Saturdays ago. His opponent also endorsed by the president. The president felt he wasn't on board with the agenda. Same thing that he felt about the sitting Senator John Cornyn in the United States Senate from Texas, and thus he got behind Ken Paxton, who's more of a loyalist to the president, threw his weight behind him, and voila, he gets elected on the C Spire text line. Well, he got elected on the Republican side to represent the Republicans in the general election in what promises to be both a contentious, a heavily funded, and entertaining. You got 2 characters there, and when they start mudslinging and sparring at each other, you're going to have, perhaps some of the most creative, classic, innovative advertising, mudslinging advertising, negative advertising ever, don't you think?
There's a possibility.
With these 2 candidates, because Paxton has a bunch of baggage, and Tallarico is just a wacko, and you're going to have lots of stuff that's going to expose his wackiness, such as believing there are 6 genders and God is bipolar, and taxpayer-funded transition treatments, and the whole thing. Women competing in men's sports, and abortion being a kind thing instructed by the Bible. I know I'm missing some stuff here. Of course, claiming he was a vegan a few years ago, and now running around the Texas pandering, the Texas countryside pandering to the locals by chomping on turkey legs.
Well, now they've walked that back.
Oh, okay. What's that? I didn't get it.
Now they are proposing or stating that they will be an all-vegan campaign.
Okay. Good for them. Idiots. In Texas, and by the way, Rhino and I looked it up. This county we were talking about before we went to break, it's Kenedy in the southeast corner of Texas, just 3 up from the border. There are 315 people. 315. Do they all work for the county, you think? Now, it is true that this is prime cattle territory. So there is it's a pretty sizable county in terms of land, 3 million. Did I read that right? No, that's not. 1,946 square miles. It's not a small county for 315 people, but expansive cattle ranches. And someone named John G. and Marie Stella Kennedy, Kenedy, established a memorial foundation for wildlife conservation. I'd say they achieved that because there are 315 people in the county. There's a whole lot more wildlife in that 1,946 square miles than people. So that was done. But 8 people voted, and we were just doing the math on how many are probably...
I finally figured it out.
Okay. Yep.
The King Ranch.
Oh, that's it. That's exactly right. Isn't that also prime hunting ground as well, right?
So, yeah, that makes
sense.
Where probably the majority work.
So it's just
on or around it.
Okay, got a big expanse of land, just a bunch of acreage and no people. That's cool. King Ranch, yes, big time, big money. But on the C Spire text line, an example was sorry. Don't know if this is a warning sign for Republicans or not, but the info from the county in the above text, yeah. And so in that text, he sent this morning on the morning show, this individual on our text line, and in an example of what a lot of Republicans from outside might be missing regarding Texas. In heavily Hispanic Star, it's S-T-A-R-R County, which Trump flipped in 2024, the Dems got 6,600 votes in the primary. Ken Paxton won that county tonight with 60 votes. And add in Cornyn's 30. 90 Republican votes. Wow. It could be. It absolutely could be. And something else that Texter points out we hadn't even gotten to yet. Appreciate you sending this. The Reverend Representative Al Green. He's the one that brought the stick to the State of the Union and made an outburst. I don't remember what it was. He's a loon. He got beat. He lost his primary. You know who else lost was names escapes me. The ran for Attorney General. That is a very strong, outspoken Republican. Can't believe I can't remember his name here. It's escaping me. Member of the Freedom Caucus. But he decided to throw his hat in the ring for Attorney General in the state of Texas, and he went down. Chip Roy, yeah. I knew it was a single-syllable first name. I couldn't remember. Thank you. Representative Chip Roy. You see him a lot. The rather somewhat bald-headed, goateed Chip Roy, a bit of a firebrand, big supporter of the president. He went down. He decided to run for Attorney General in the state of Texas, and he lost his bid for that. Interesting. Let's see. Yeah, also on the C Spire text line, Brian the Delta reminds it's the Kennedy Ranch that borders the King Ranch. Get the book, Prince of Poachers. It's very interesting. Appreciate that. Yep, absolutely. On the C Spire text line, talking about the low voter turnout, 20% will vote, 99% will complain. Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. Everybody complains whether they vote or not. I agree. Also, is there such a thing as a true Republican? I think we have to start by defining that. And I think that's where the issue is when you hear about this it's supposed to be a pejorative. At least it's cast in our discussion, in our discourse as a pejorative. Rhino, Republican in name only. R-I-N-O, not to be confused with our producer here, R-Y-N-O. So, I don't think there's any consensus on what constitutes a Republican. Now, you could look at the platform, but most people aren't familiar with the platform. I would say that's true. And secondly, I'm not sure that has universal acceptance and approval. In fact, I'd say it doesn't. So it's about defining what Republican values and principles are and policies are in order to determine, I guess, who then adheres to those, who aligns with those, who espouses those. And then you get to, okay, well, what is conservatism? Which is different than a party definition. And there are actually some fairly widely accepted values and philosophies with respect to conservatism, because that didn't start yesterday, and that didn't get born by a party. That was around long before there was an American Republican Party. So that's a philosophy of government, and it starts with, first and foremost, that our rights are bestowed upon us by our Creator, and that government's function, its role primarily, is to protect those. You got to start with that. And we're talking about the unalienable rights as cited in our Declaration of Independence. You know, the thing that Joe Biden could never get right. I don't know, is it just me, but shouldn't a president of the United States be able to just rattle that off the top of their head? You would think. He couldn't rattle much off the top of his head, though. But that's one thing. We believe that. We believe that government is best when it's closer to the people governed. That's an element, a philosophy of conservatism, that market economies produce better outcomes.
I think you have to define it in two different camps. You have the politicos, the people that are plugged in, and that's a much smaller percentage of the population than just the everyday average Joes and Janes that may hear an hour or two of political conversation in a week, if that much. And I think it's completely different for that group. I think for that group, it's more along the lines of a party that embraces sanity and reality versus a party that embraces insanity and doing everything in their power to avoid reality.
Well, that's absolutely cutting to the chase right there, and I agree with you. I totally agree with you. That pretty much encompasses all of it. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Seabrook.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Bicycle, bicycle, bicycle. I want to ride my bicycle, bicycle, bicycle. I want to ride my bicycle. I want to ride my bike. I want to ride my bicycle. I want to ride it where I like. You say black, I say white. You say bar, I say bite. You say shark, I say him. And Jaws was never my scene, and I don't like Star Wars.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Once again, it's Caleb Sailors at 11:20 today. Andy Gipson, the Commissioner of Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce, in the Element Wealth studio at 12:05. Thomas in Greenwood, of course, no surprise what he says here. So when will Republicans become conservatives? Here's when they will meet your standards, Thomas. When those who adhere to your standards 100% can win. Until then, they're going to continue rolling as is. Because you are the outlier. I think that's what you don't get. Now, my personal policy is to vote for the most conservative person in a race where I vote. Now, that's based on their alignment with my beliefs. And those are rooted in conservatism. And I just shared with you 3 or 4 of those philosophical principles. that are considered at the heart of underpinning conservatism. It's got to start with that. And I know that a lot of people, so somebody said, I'm a conservative constitutionalist that often votes for Republicans or vote for no on Wicker. So I would ask, well, what exactly does that mean? Conservative constitutionalist. And here's the problem with that, is that's been kind of hijacked and distorted a bit. It's subject to interpretation. That's, by the way, why we have courts. That's why we have a Supreme Court. That's their job. So if something's being done that we feel is unconstitutional, doesn't adhere to our Constitution, then our remedy for that is to file a lawsuit and take it to the Supreme Court and let the Supreme Court rule. Yes or no? And they've been doing a lot of that lately, haven't they, Rhino? They've seen a lot of cases cross their docket. And what we hope is that they dispense justice objectively and that they're not influenced by party or even by principles other than the Constitution. That's what's supposed to happen. Now, I know you can get into the weeds of, well, they are strict textual constitutionalists. Are they looking more at the spirit and the intent? That's a whole other discussion, right? But that's what makes this country great, is that we can have these kinds of discussions. We can have this robust, lively debate. That's what makes it great. And we keep on trucking. That's the good news. And if you feel like that in some way government is encroaching upon you and government is wronging you, that's the remedy. That was the vision of our founders. And by the way, not decided by a single monarch. That's what they were trying to escape. Yes or no? One person. That's not the way our system works, thank God. Pretty clear. I can read the Constitution. Many of the Republicans ignore the Constitution. You know what is going on, Gerard. Well, I don't. Tell me what's going on. And give me an example. I'm not trying to be confrontational with you, but give me an example of something you feel today that is in place, in law, in operation, that violates the Constitution. And I'm certainly not saying there's not anything. I think there's stuff going on all the time there that is. And again, the remedy is file a lawsuit. Take it to the court. Let them decide. You know, the cases that the court heard, Rhino, that probably were I think, most impactful, the Chevron deference. You remember that. When the court basically said, you know what, you agencies, you don't make the laws here. Your job is to implement them and apply them. But you've taken it too far. And thank God the Supreme Court said, yeah, remember West Virginia with the EPA stuff? And they said, yeah, EPA, that's not what the law says. You kind of took it upon yourself to expand and embellish that and extend it. You can't do that. You see these people in that Capitol building? That's their job. Your job, agencies, is simply to execute what they send you. But it's what I call the fourth branch of government. You look at the agency complex in the federal government, it's the fourth branch. Totally is. So this person says the Save America Act. Well, I hear you. I agree that people who are not U.S. citizens should not be allowed to vote in our federal elections. That's absolutely true. By the way, that doesn't extend, unfortunately, to state and local elections, just federal. And there is some, honestly, fairly minor evidence that's going on. The question is that because the law is being intentionally broken, or it's just poor administration? Probably a little of both, depending on where you are. And while I agree the Save America Act could certainly be a valuable tool in preventing and avoiding that, and we just implemented law here, Senator Jeremy England authored, and of course Secretary of State Michael Watson will be required at the Secretary of State's level to work with all of our elections commissioners and counties to just ensure that our voter rolls don't contain people who are not legal American citizens. So it's not that we don't have laws. We have a law that says you can't do that. So we're not doing anything that's violating the Constitution. The execution of it, it does. And surely, if you're aware of cases where illegals voted, you could absolutely file a lawsuit. I don't exactly know what the grounds would be, Rhino, the charges, and who the defendant would be in that case. I have to think about it. Of course, you know what happens in lawsuits. Lawyers, they have a tendency to throw the kitchen sink in the list of defendants. Let's just throw it against the wall and sue everybody and see what happens. So, but that's how we deal with that. You know, Alabama implemented something similar not too long ago, and they ran that process. The same thing we're going to do in this state is run our voter rolls against the SAVE database, not to be confused with the SAVE Act, which is just a federal electronic tool that stores immigration status about people in this country to the extent they have it. And if it kicks out and says, say that person's not a citizen, you're to remove them from the rolls in Mississippi. Actually, I think the way our process works, Rhino, is you notify them. They have to come prove they're a citizen. If they don't do that, then you take them off, right? In Alabama, they did that. They found 10 in the whole state. Now, that's 10 too many, as far as I'm concerned. That should never happen. The biggest problem is that the Democrats opened the borders and tens of millions of people crossed into our country, and they're scattered about, and we're relying on these 3,300 county systems to administer all that 100% properly. And remember, Rhino, before this law passed in Mississippi, you just signed an affidavit, essentially. Checked the box. Yep, I'm a citizen. Nobody went and checked it when you registered. And then once it's in, there was no requirement in Mississippi to go verify that those that are registered on the voter rolls are legal. But this law that we just passed, I think, is a common sense law, changes that. And we'll see. I'll be interesting to see the results after the first iteration of comparing voter rolls in Mississippi to the federal SAVE database. But, yeah, he says, yeah, Mississippi's not the problem, the big blue states. I agree. So what you should do in the way that should work, and I'm not a lawyer here, I'm just thinking through the way the process typically works, is our attorney general would sue the other states on behalf of the state of Mississippi who felt like that the election results were tainted by illegals voting in their states. If I'm not mistaken, Rhino, didn't Ken Paxton, as the Attorney General of Texas, who we've been talking about this morning, just won the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate in Texas, didn't he sue the other states after the 2020 election? You remember something about that? Certain states, I should say, for election irregularities. I think he did. And I don't remember exactly what the outcome of that was. But that's an example of how that. So I would suggest call our Attorney General's office.
Yeah, he filed it with the Supreme Court because it was against Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and the Supreme Court dismissed it.
Okay.
Concluding that Texas lacked legal standing under Article 3 of the Constitution to interfere in how other states conduct their elections.
There you go. So it really needs to come from somebody inside that state. I'm guessing they would have more standing, maybe, someone in that state, because it's my home state, right, where this harm was done to me. So surely there's somebody in Georgia that would do that. Why'd it have to be the Attorney General of Texas? We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Hello.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
So the race was called pretty early last night in Texas, the U.S. Senate race. And then, I mean, even in the final hours last night when Cornyn knew he was going down, he was attacking Paxton. He told reporters that Paxton is a, quote, embarrassment. And he brought up his wife's accusations of marital infidelity. He said, quote, "You can't trust Ken Paxton." So, you know who's going to use this? Of course, the Democrats. They're going to use this in the coming general election. And this is going to be a Texas-sized price tag, as they say. Just incredible. There's going to be some massive amount of Trump money. Senate officials are hoping that the president and his super PAC, it's got $350 million in it, will pony up. The main Senate Republican super PAC left Texas entirely out of its fall ad reservations. I think they're going to have to rethink that one. So Democrats are going to dump a bunch of money in there as well. They think they got a shot. That goofy Tallarico, he raised $27 million in the first quarter. I'm telling you, it's going to end up being $1 billion. And, of course, this is reverberating on Capitol Hill. There's some old guard Senate Republicans. They're starting to object to the president's involvement. And they're pushing back on, some of his agenda, the ballroom, the anti-weaponization fund, etc. Senator Tom Tillis, man, he's retiring, but he ain't going down without a fight. He just is in the president's business every day, it seems like. But you got to be happy that old Representative Al Green, he was out. So, by the way, the crypto industry, they got involved in that race. I don't know if you saw that, Rhino, because he has been campaigning heavily against the industry. He did a speech on the House recently saying he was unbought and attacked those in the party who side with what he calls cryptocrats. And so the crypto industry, of course, has a giant super PAC, and they invested in his opponent. You went down. I would say you're anti-innovation is what you are. You're anti-business. Of course, we already know that. So, yeah, he went down. Really something. Ed in the Delta, Thomas is trolling. He makes these comments to spark conversation. He's a smart guy. He knows we'll never have pure conservatives in office unless the Republicans have a supermajority in the House and Senate and a Republican president and a strictly conservative Supreme Court. That'll be about the time that pigs start flying. Well, I think that the distinction here, Ed, to point out is that Thomas and his ilk don't think that will get it. His point is Republicans aren't conservative. That's his never-ending sort of infinite point, is that Republicans aren't conservative. I don't know that there's a person running for political office that would ever meet his standards and those that align with him in that respect. And, hey, look, that's fine. I'm not upset about that, and I don't think negatively about Thomas whatsoever in that regard. But I think the difference is there's being idealistic, then there's being practical and realistic. Would you agree? And somewhere in the middle, you try to get something done at the end of the day and have some overlap. And then I just shared with you kind of my thoughts on what it means to be conservative. And I know that's extremely high philosophical. Like, that doesn't address the SAVE Act, for example, right? But it underpins it. Well,
it's the politics behind the SAVE Act that are the reason Senate Republicans are being beaten in the primaries.
Oh, that's exactly right.
Paxton and Cornyn, that literally comes down to Paxton publicly saying, I will drop out and endorse Cornyn if the Senate passes the SAVE Act.
Yeah.
The Senate, controlled by Republicans, doesn't seem to be all that Republican when it comes to allowing Trump any recess appointments.
Yeah.
They
That's
only
right.
have themselves to blame. They're ignoring a large portion of the population that's saying, do your damn jobs.
I totally agree. And that I think that resonated yesterday. I truly do. I think there's a bunch of frustration with the Republicans, the status quo, and they're looking to rotate the crops. That's the beauty of our system. You got to love it. It was well conceived, and we're seeing it play out here 250 years later. Still works. Still works. Fox News, SuperTalk News, Caleb Sailors, 11:20, Commissioner Gipson at 12:05.
Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Hump Day.
Once again, Caleb Sailors in the studio in the next segment, and then Andy Gipson, the Commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce, joins Middays at 12:05. So, just looking here at something Thomas said, just talking about demanding conservatism, blah, blah, blah. If we demand it, we'd get it. The problem is there's no consensus on conservatism, and that your belief doesn't align of what conservatism it is, doesn't align with others. There's no consensus. And the very people that you would cast as not being conservative believe they are. They'll hold themselves as conservatives. So it comes down to specifically, what are you talking about? Just interesting. So you just sent something from Mississippi News. I don't know if this is true or not. TVA is considering raising electric rates to meet AI data center demands. Well, what data centers? Let's see, where would they be powering, Rhino? Meridian? The Compass facility? Who's powering in DeSoto County? Who's got that footprint? I thought that was Energy's area. So
the reporting I've seen on it was out of Tennessee, out of Knoxville.
Oh, okay. So I don't know what's going on up in that state, but that sounds to me like that a deal was cut between TVA and the data center operators that it doesn't really push the costs to the consumers, this being the facilities. I mean, that's how that problem is addressed. And it's got to be done thoughtfully and methodically. But apparently, TVA's deal, and I don't know anything about their deal. So, but that's certainly a problem. And that is just core to the debate. That is not the case here. I haven't heard anything about TVA raising rates in Mississippi. And certainly, Energy's said nothing about that. And most of the facilities are actually in their footprint. They're investing $3.5 billion in new generation and transmission capacity. And they maintain, straight from CEO of Entergy, Haley Fisackerly, that the AWS, et cetera, are bearing those costs. And in fact, he's made the point on our show, and I've seen him deliver speeches several times talking about that issue, that it's understood and it's historically the price of electricity, just like everything else, continues to climb, just normal inflation. I mean, my power bill is certainly a lot more today than it was 5 years ago, my electric bill, and there are no data centers. So you can't blame it on that. But his point was, Yeah, there's an economies of scale at play here that we've got to spend money to modernize the grid without data centers. And
it looks like this whole conversation started with a letter that TVA sent to local power companies back in February that they shared with news agencies in Tennessee on Tuesday.
Okay.
TVA spokesperson, this is reported from WATE News. TVA spokesperson Scott Brooks explained that in the last year, data centers made up around 18% of TVA's overall industrial load.
Okay.
And that number is expected to double by the year 2030. Brooks said 99% of data centers it provides power for are connected to local power providers like KUP, and if it approved all the data centers interested in coming to East Tennessee, there would be an increased power demand of 11,000 megawatts. The quote continues, as a public provider, TVA is not saying no to these data centers, but we're saying yes, but. The but is you need to work with local power providers if that's where you're going to connect and make sure that they can handle the load without putting a strain or an additional burden on their customers.
Yeah, and if it does, then you got to pass the cost on to the people who are increasing the load. As simple as that. This isn't hard to figure out, and what we've seen in other parts of the country is that got ahead. That process didn't play out. That the shovels went in the ground without proper planning for the power load, and they got blindsided by that, had to invest a lot of money into meeting the demand, and had to go to the ratepayers for that. So, because they did negotiate that as part of their deal with the big customer. That was a mistake, and that was misguided. So, I'm proud of the fact that that's not what we did here in Mississippi. We handled it much more thoughtfully, much more prudently to avoid that situation. So,
yeah, even on the first page of the letter that they sent out, the following proposals are intended to enable growth while retaining existing customers and to increase local power company flexibility, all in a manner that protects the people in the valley. Contract demand alignment. Number 2, rate structure stabilization. TVA proposes creating a new contract option that provides rate structure stability for manufacturing time of use service customers with contract demands greater than 5,000 kilowatts. This contract option will offer assurances of rate structure stability for subscribing customers.
There you go. Thank you. That's it. Good stuff. Yeah, and on the C Spire text line from the 901s pointed out, absolutely, that the XAI facility in South Haven, Elon Musk was in a hurry, couldn't wait. He's generating his own power. That's causing some noise problems, those turbines, but that's actually legal. What he's doing is legal. You get permits for a year to exceed those guidelines, but got to stop it when that year expires. I don't know when that is exactly. Feels like it's within a few months, though, right, when that happens. And, there's a massive development out in West Texas. Same deal. Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, was for a little while was the Secretary of Energy under the president in his first administration. He's heavily involved in this project, and it too, all self-contained, nuclear part of the mix. It's really pretty straightforward to embrace that, and hopefully we will and can. And I can't remember the total power. It's like 20 gigawatts or some insane amount when you think about it. So in Amazon and Madison counties, 1, just to put it in perspective, and that's with roughly 16, 17 buildings, 250,000 square feet of building. So all self-contained, one big campus, providing their own water, power, all the above. Now, some data center operators would prefer to be connected to the grid just for reliability, or a combination. Generate their own power, back up to the grid. Interesting. Amish are real conservative, says Hogman. That's an interesting point. Hadn't thought about that. Yeah, and again, that just comes down to your definition of conservatism. And I feel pretty certain, Rhino, if we ask the folks that are tuned in to define it, if 10 responded, it'd be 10 different answers. And every one of them would say, I'm conservative. That's the point I'm making. So think about it, I guess, in terms of policy, in terms of current government programs and operations. Go down the list. Agencies. What is conservative, what's not. Then that's really what is at play here. I mean, that's the more specific application of it as opposed to the philosophical aspect of conservatism. And that's kind of where we are. But you know as well as I do, man, once they get in office, they're not thinking about that, honestly. They're thinking about what's going to get me elected next time. That's what they're thinking about more than anything. Let's see. Paula Meridian says, instead of putting more burden on the citizens in that area, why can't they make these data centers pay a higher electric rate to compensate? Well, I think that Rhino did a pretty good job of explaining what the company said. And this private companies negotiating. And in the state of Mississippi, quite certain if Entergy, which is the electricity provider in the western part of the state, and one that will be supplying power to the biggest campus, which is the two of them, Amazon and Madison County, if they showed up a year from now, 2 years, when all the buildings in the original project, the first phase of the project, are online and said, I'm sorry, we blew it, we got to charge more, the Public Service Commission shouldn't grant that. That's the key, that they still have to approve those rate increases. They're going to have to justify that on some other basis other than we miscalculated. I don't think they miscalculated. They're pretty smart people that do that kind of stuff. So I feel like we're in good shape here. The reality is, Paul, it's my understanding that Entergy, by the way, presently is a $2 billion a year revenue company. Talking about Entergy Mississippi, not the entire Entergy parent company in Louisiana, but just Mississippi, $2 billion a year in revenue. That Amazon's going to pay them $1 billion. So they're going to increase their revenue by 50%. One customer. Pretty good. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio with Caleb Sailors.
Interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge news. Huge news. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays from the Element Wealth studio. We're pleased to welcome now Caleb Sailors, Multimedia Journalist, SuperTalk Mississippi News. All right, Caleb, we made a special effort to have you on today. So I had JT on Friday. We, of course, were at the Armed Forces Museum for Memorial Day. Mm-hmm. Always good to be down there with those guys. But we brought you in today to give us an update on more news is cranking out since then.
It's been very busy, Gerard, and ironically, I was thinking about you on Friday because I was passing by Camp Shelby. I was at in a wedding in Fairhope on Friday, so I was driving. I was like, "Oh, Gerard's probably in there right now." But yeah, it's a lot happening in Mississippi. A lot happening in the sports world in Mississippi. We've got history that's been made on two different fronts. Pearl River Community College won a national championship in JUCO baseball, Division II, and first national championship in program history for the softball team there. And I want to give a shout out to Anna Grace Garcia, pitcher for the Wildcats. She pitched a complete game in the championship, and they won 2-1. She gave up one run in the first inning and then held, it was Des Moines area, the team they played, held them at bay the rest of the game. So, I mean, a one-run gem that she delivered, and Pearl River gets the win. And
they're pretty good, aren't they, Pearl River?
Really good program all around. I mean, the baseball program there is competing in the World Series, really good as well. But, yeah, in this pitcher, she pitches a complete game and dominates, and they get their program's first ever championship. Now, also on the softball front, Belhaven. This is also historic, too. The Blazers are in the World Series for the second time in 3 years. I mean, in 2024, the Blazers were runners-up. I mean, barely fell short in the championship series. They took one game but fell in the rubber match. But head coach Kevin Griffin, people might know that name. He's the father of Connor Griffin, who's showing out for Mississippi for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But he's got his girls back in the World Series again, and we're going to get to catch up with him tomorrow. And so you can stay tuned at supertalk.fm and hear a conversation between me and Coach Griffin, and we'll talk about this run that his Belhaven team is making. But they're in the World Series as well, and they'll be playing tomorrow. And so if you guys want to tune in, they're also playing Mississippi State softball team. Made history, and what they did is kind of the equivalent of someone taking down Nick Saban's Alabama football team, but on the softball front. They went in and punched Oklahoma in the mouth. I mean, this is an Oklahoma program that is the face of college softball.
Yeah.
Mississippi State rolls in.
Have been for years, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes. And Mississippi State rolls in to Norman and is like, no. We may be underdogs. We're still dogs.
Yeah.
And they went and knocked them out, shut out in Game 3 to get to the World Series. And this will be Mississippi State's first ever trip to Oklahoma City as a softball club. So really, really cool things happening. And then baseball. Mississippi's at the epicenter of the college baseball scene all the time anyway. And look, 2 of our 3 D1 teams are hosting here in Mississippi. Our major D1 teams are hosting. Mississippi State will have the Starkville Regional. Southern Miss has the Hattiesburg Regional. Southern Miss got a pretty tough draw now, Gerard. They're the number 9 overall seed, but in their regional is Virginia, very tough Virginia team, led by Chris Pollard first year, but this guy made Duke really, really good at baseball. And so he's carrying that legacy of being a good coach at Virginia. They got a Jacksonville State team that kind of will remind people of that Murray State team Ole Miss played last year that just hits, and finds gaps. And then there is in the Southern Miss Regional, Little Rock, too, and that's who the Golden Eagles will play first on Friday. Moving up into Starkville, Mississippi State has, I would say, an easier draw than a lot in the field. They've got Cincinnati as the 2 seed, Louisiana as the 3 seed, and Lipscomb as the 4 seed. Mississippi State has played Lipscomb already this year. And
they're in Tennessee, aren't they?
Yes, in Nashville.
Yeah.
And one of those games where the Bulldogs played against Lipscomb, Mississippi State won 26-0. This is baseball, not football. And so Mississippi State's got that draw, but they're paired with Georgia, and Georgia's beaten Mississippi State 4 times this year. So the Bulldogs might have an opportunity at revenge, and Ole Miss is kind of the lone team in the state in the D1 scene that got left out of hosting. The Rebels probably a win or 2 in the conference, a regular season away from hosting, but the Rebels are at Nebraska. Beautiful ballpark, by the way, Gerard. If you haven't seen it, gorgeous, gorgeous place in Lincoln. And in the Lincoln Regional, obviously Nebraska is the 1 seed. Ole Miss is the 2 seed. Arizona State, a very, very tough 3 seed. Might be the toughest 3 seed in the regional field. And then South Dakota State is the 4 seed. The Rebels will play on Friday night against Arizona State. And we've got a lot of
That'll be a
sports.
good matchup.
It will be, and Arizona State's ace is incredible, and they also have a player that's batting over 400 with 28 home runs. So, I mean, it's a tough Arizona State team, especially when going against the ace. And Mike Bianco hasn't announced who he'll be starting on Friday night, so a lot of Ole Miss fans are probably expecting Hunter Elliott, but who knows? Taylor Rabe might be on the bump for the Rebels too, which, I mean, he'll be throwing 98 over the plate. That'll be tough for Arizona State, but it will be it'll be good regional play altogether. But that Hattiesburg regional is one I'm really keeping an eye on, because that Jacksonville State team might be talent-wise possibly the best team in that regional, though Southern Miss is very, very good and deep in the bullpen and has more pitching than any team in that regional. But Virginia, also a storied program led by a very good head coach.
You know, the one thing that you can typically count on is that when it's whoever is playing whomever, ace versus ace is always going to be a good game.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if it's Lipscomb or who it is, and I'm not trying to disparage them, but even the smaller programs, they got at least one person on the hill that can mow down everybody.
I mean, I remember last year watching the Oxford Regional. Murray State had that one ace that was just,
That's right.
I can't think of his name now. I can't think of his name, but he was incredible. And so you're right, and I think we'll see that. And in the Starkville Regional, we might see Cincinnati has a very, very good ace, and they might withhold him in hopes of, okay, if we could squeak past Louisiana, we'll unload our ace on a Mississippi State. And you see kind of the chess game being played as well. And so that'll be fun. A not as fun story. Thankfully, everybody was okay in this. A military plane crashed in Noxubee County yesterday, and Sugarlock, the way that town is pronounced is not how it's spelled. So if you look up Sugarlock, it's not going to be spelled how you think. Yesterday afternoon around 12:30, right after noon, and 2 individuals that were on this jet, it's a Navy jet, it's a Navy training jet that was assigned to the air base in Meridian. Thankfully, both of them were able to eject safely. Now, they were injured, had to go to the hospital, be treated for injuries. Last I've heard, they were expected to make a full recovery, which is good. But kind of a crazy situation, though. We've had plane crashes happening in Mississippi in the last couple of years, and one of those things you don't really expect, but it is good to see that these 2 individuals were safely ejected, but authorities are continuing to investigate this crash and making sure that, the scene is secured and they figure out what happened with the jet or the pilot error or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry to hear that. What about UMMC? They're at an airplane.
Yeah, that's a really, really cool story. The University of Mississippi Medical Center, here based in Jackson, although they've got satellites all throughout the state, is adding to its air fleet. So you've seen the medical helicopters flying around Mississippi, which is a great service because if you're in a rural area and there's not really ambulatory care on the ground that can get you or get you quickly, go to the air, right? Helicopters are a lot faster than vehicles. Well, to make matters even better or more convenient for the University of Mississippi Medical Center, they're adding an airplane to their fleet.
Interesting.
And so now this plane will help them serve a broader area, so they'll be more regionally focused. So potentially patients in Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, etc., could get transported. Obviously UMC is Mississippi's only level 1 trauma center, and so this will help get access to other areas of the state that maybe the helicopters can't quite get to. And so, the officials at UMC are super excited about this, super excited to add this plane to their arsenal, to their fleet, and it'll help them as a major medical response organization, too. Another cool thing happening at UMC, too, is there's been more money going to this cancer center that UMC is trying to build. Trustmark announced a $2 million donation to that, or they're pledging $2 million to that. And this is on top of John and Sandy Black giving tens of millions of dollars, the state legislature appropriating $100 million to support this cancer institute. That helps. You have all these cancer patients in Mississippi by the tens of thousands that will now have easier access to care. And you have a team or several teams that will be studying their specific forms of cancer, getting them treatment, getting them options that will help them. And even in Mississippi, now we have a law that biomarker testing has been expanded. So now these patients will even have better access to care, too. So a lot of really cool things happening through the University of Mississippi Medical Center, which is kind of, the state's medical extension, serving residents that some of the other systems may not be able to serve. And so having this cancer center here will be huge, especially if it gets National Cancer Institute designation, which is what they're aiming to get.
Proud of them. Desperately needed here in Mississippi so that folks, when they're dealing with these difficult situations, don't have the added stress of travel.
And a lot of work to the team. A lot of work has gone into getting this as well.
No doubt about it. It's a total joint effort, and it will be a valuable asset in the state of Mississippi. Caleb Sailors, multimedia journalist to SuperTalk Mississippi News, has been our guest. Appreciate it, Caleb.
Thank you, Gerard.
We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. Stay with us. It's Andy Gipson at 12:05.
From the Seabrook.com.
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Bernie Sanders continues to mock the billionaires with his proposed wealth tax. So now he's taking this approach. He's digging into the math a little bit. He says poor Elon Musk would only have $737 billion left. And so the group Occupy Democrats, they said that he's an octogenarian, right? The senator. He has delivered one of the funniest, most savage takedowns of billionaire whining in recent memory. He said while pushing for higher taxes on the ultra-wealthy, he mocked his opponents who claim such policies are too harsh on the poor, suffering billionaires. My opponents claim that this legislation is punitive and confiscatory. Oh, we're just picking on these poor billionaires. I mean, my God, how cruel can you be? And then came the punchlines that had the room laughing. If that bill were in effect this year, Elon Musk would pay $39 billion more in taxes. This confiscatory, terrible, drastic, radical piece of legislation would leave Musk with just $737 billion. Then he had to go after Elon Musk and a couple of others, and they say, oh, yeah, this would raise trillions over a decade. And, of course, here's what they want to use it for. Payments to working families. In other words, they just want it coming in one door and going out the other. I ask you, we've been talking about this morning, is that conservative? That's just blatant welfare. That's redistribution. That actually is socialism. That's government determining who gets money, who keeps it, who sends it, who receives it. It would put a 5% annual wealth tax on the 940 people in the country with a net worth of $1 billion or more. So we're going to rely on 940 people to fund this wide range, this long list of government giveaway programs. 940. And, of course, his point, according to the Occupy Democrats crowd, is crystal clear. The ultra-wealthy have more money than any human being could possibly need in multiple lifetimes. Yet they still cry victim the second anyone suggests they pay their fair share. Well, first, I've never heard anybody cry victim, but they have warned of the consequences of such confiscatory policies. I personally believe that when you step in and you start taxing one so as to limit their personal net worth, it doesn't stay there. It starts finding its way down the income ladder, down the income strata. Next thing you know, it hits you. They're not going to be satisfied with just that. They can dream up more programs. Now, this, I think, comes back to what is the core function of government. And so he continues to say the ultra-rich can pay absolutely more, and pretending otherwise is getting harder and harder to take seriously. So that's how we devise tax policy in this country, based on who can afford it? So back to the discussion, kind of did this as a backdrop for that. We had earlier today on the definition of conservatism. My belief with respect to taxation is that those policies should raise the minimum revenue necessary to fund the constitutionally appropriate functions of government. And certainly we could get into a protracted debate on what those functions are that meet that standard of constitutionally appropriate. Is the earned income tax credit constitutionally appropriate, for example? Because that actually is one of the big welfare programs. Kind of dug into that a little bit last night, got curious and started researching that. As the major welfare programs in this country and the amount expended on them, at the top of the list, we've discussed this many times, Medicaid, $610 billion. That's at the federal level. Now, it's a $1.1 trillion program when you factor in the state portion. It's a matching program, just like it is here in Mississippi. The federal government sends us roughly $7 billion. We contribute in our state general fund budget $1 billion, and then we have provider taxes to the tune of $500 million. $8.5 billion program. The TANF. Lord knows that's gotten a lot of attention. I'm not sure anybody ever heard of it, Rhino, till this scandal, if you will, popped up. It's a $16 billion program. Not that much. SNAP, that's a big one. $104 billion. Last I checked, I think it's $440 million in Mississippi. Housing assistance, $67 billion, and the EITC, $70 billion. So those are the 5 major categories of welfare programs and the spending associated with each program. Top of the list, again, Medicaid. And the Medicaid program continues to expand in terms of spending, just as it did right here in Mississippi when the state of Mississippi Medicaid, Division of Medicaid, showed up for their budget review and told the legislature, we need a bunch more money. I think $400 million is what they asked for. They also had to get a funding for their deficit in 2025. That was $50 million. They asked for another $400 million to run the program in the coming year. I think the legislature settled on $200 million or a little less. That suggests to me they're probably going to show up again next year with a deficit situation, and the legislature will have to grapple with that, have to deal with that. So that I just found that curious that Medicaid, I knew that was the biggest program, but wasn't familiar with the others. And of course, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, he is running this fraud task force where they are investigating fraud in these programs. There should be zero. It's not really welfare, but small business loans to Small Business Administration. And that's something that we certainly could question as a constitutionally appropriate function of government. But the investigation revealed some $22 billion in fraud. I can't remember the time frame. That was over several years. Medicaid reimbursements, $1.3 billion. Not surprised at that whatsoever. And that's mostly committed by the providers, the physicians, the clinics, the hospitals that file the Medicaid claims. And then government contracts. Now, I don't know how much of that's fraud as much as it is just procurement that led to these contracts that was not aligned with law, didn't satisfy law. $6.3 billion. And then student aid, $60 million. That's so far what the fraud squad, as they are calling themselves, has identified. Interesting. So a great little AI meme here that depicts it's the Back to the Future scene with what was the name, Marty? Can't remember his last name there. Elon Musk is portraying him in this.
Marty McFly.
That's right. And the crazy doctor.
Brown.
Yeah. And it's Bernie Sanders portrayed as him. He's got the big remote control with the antenna on it for the car. That's pretty good. So, Thomas, cut spending. I know that's all you care about, and I get it, and I care about it too. But it's not going to happen. It's kind of hard to do it when inflation is still at play. So even without expanding programs and expanding the workforce in the government, spending typically goes up just because the cost of stuff goes up. Think about the amount of money we spend on education. We just passed massive teacher pay raises. We certainly could have not done that, and that increases spending, of course. We certainly could have just said, I'm sorry, teachers, you can't make any more money. That probably would have exacerbated the current teacher shortage in the state. And the other states seem to have enough money to make that happen to retain those teachers. So you say, why campaign on that promise? I don't know anybody that did. Said, I'm absolutely going to cut spending. And when I hear that, I think that means it was this much this year and this much minus a certain amount the next year. Coming right back.
Poly Up of Mississippi. Bring the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Bum 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 bum. I feel free. Bum 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 bum. I feel free. Bum 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 bum. I feel free. Bum 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 bum. I feel free. Bum 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 bum. I feel free. Bum 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 bum. I feel free. Bum 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 bum. I feel free.
So talking about this fraud, of course, Medicaid, I got to tell you, I'm pretty familiar with the Medicaid program. I didn't know that there was daycare and hospice services, which is where all the fraud, I shouldn't say all, but a good bit of it, certainly in Minnesota, Los Angeles. What the heck's that all about? Why is that part of Medicaid? It's supposed to be health care for poor people. That's what it's supposed to be. It started out, of course, as health insurance to pay health care providers to treat the low-income elderly, the blind, the disabled, pregnant women, and children that live in low-income homes. That got expanded in 2010, so-called Medicaid expansion, to cover low-income, able-bodied adults. It's supposed to be health care. What happened? Why hospice? I mean, I get, to some extent, I get that, how that crosses over into health care. I understand that, but daycare? I'm struggling connecting the dots on that one, which is what was going on in Minnesota. And it's like, didn't you see the report, Rhino? Like 80% of the hospices in California were located in inner city Los Angeles or something, like a building with 30 of them in it or something like that. Just a big fraud, big scam. Again, I maintain powerful technology, AI, video surveillance, all the above could be used in identifying these fraudsters, preventing it, shutting it down. That's the way to do it. But the task force created by the White House seeks to, I think, prosecute 15 people in Minnesota stealing tens of millions of dollars from Medicaid. Make an example of them. I'm all for it. The Trump administration has charged these 15 people. It's bleeding these programs, no doubt about it. Jerry in Waynesboro says these nonprofit electric co-ops that provide internet service, how do they justify charging for high-speed internet when the government paid for it to be deployed and there were no costs to implement it, but it is $60 a month for lowest package and never goes down, nonprofit? Well, nonprofit doesn't mean lose money. It means break even, essentially. So keep that in mind, Jerry. They still have to pay for the operating expenses. And having been in the industry, I can share this with you, that networks are like boats and horses. Your costs are just starting when you purchase the asset. When you buy the horse or the boat, your expenses are just starting. A pet, for example. And I could come up with some other examples. But networks are like that as well. They require constant attention and maintenance and support and enhancement and administration. Constant. That costs money. That requires technology and tools and people. So it's not over just when you put the cables in the ground and connect it up to your routers in your house. You're just starting. You haven't gotten to the expensive part yet, as a matter of fact. So that's what's going on there. But this fraud situation in this country, I'm glad to see the Trump administration paying attention to it, getting serious about it. And they're certainly addressing it, and the vice president in charge. And I would say that is certainly a welcome sight that we're starting to pay attention to. I've always believed the Democrats look the other way. They don't want to cut it out. Now, what you've heard the vice president and others say, the speaker, this really shouldn't be a partisan issue. We should all want to combat fraud. I agree. And misspending. But you know they don't. They may wink at you when they do that. They want to look the other way because they get political value from it. They just do. That's a part of the problem. That is absolutely part of the problem. Is that
because the average Democrat politician is too worthless to actually do anything of merit in their own community, so they have to take your money and give it away and act like they did something.
That's totally true. That is 100% true. And that's kind of a shame, but I just feel like that's where we are. Interesting. The White House has urged states' attorney generals, the Government Accountability Office, they are turning the AGs, clamp down on fraud in your state. And not just identify it, but pursue it legally, charge, prosecute, and I would say whatever the consequences should be, repayment, jail time, whatever the laws say, throw the book at them. We got to stop this, man. We have enough of a problem with massive deficit spending in this country. At a minimum, we should get rid of the spending that is misspending so that we could start to rein in these $2 trillion deficits. We're coming right back after Fox News and SuperTalk News with Commissioner Andy Gipson.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Hour 3, the afternoon portion of MidDays, live from the Element Wealth Studio on this Hump Day. We're pleased to welcome now Andy Gipson. He's the Commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce. Commissioner, thanks for coming in today.
Gerard, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I want to first say thank you for clarifying your remarks the other day, the ones that got, me and a lot of farmers concerned. And I appreciate you coming back and clarifying that. And we do appreciate the opportunity to be on and talk about what's really an important issue, and that is water and the future of this state.
Yeah, and I agree. I appreciate you saying that. And, when you talk 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, you're not going to bat 1,000.
Right. Yeah.
And if in any way, and I made that point Friday, and I'm sure you heard that, if in any way what I said was interpreted as disparaging, that certainly wasn't my intent. I respect our agriculture community, as I know you do as well. I understand that, hey, no food, no fiber, no life. I get that.
Yeah.
But I do think that we also have a deep need for information and information technology, and that these two can live side by side. And I do think there are opportunities with respect to water. Regardless of the use case for that water, there are opportunities to improve efficiencies. And I know that our great agricultural industry, our farmers have done that. But you know what they've used to do that? Information technology, cloud services.
Well, our farmers are really, in Mississippi, on the cutting edge of water use and conservation technology. In Mississippi, for example, the statistics are we as a state use less than 1% of the water used nationwide. We do that because we have folks like Mississippi Mississippi State University, folks like Mississippi Farm Bureau, Mississippi Delta Council that are out there always constantly looking on how we manage and use our water, because farmers have the overall incentive to be more efficient. It costs farmers money to pump water, so for every drop that goes to that crop, they want to maximize that.
Sure.
We're leading in terms of, computerized hole selection. We're leading in terms of irrigation techniques. The entire Mississippi Delta is actually graded to a certain fall to maximize the water usage in the Delta. And we're blessed as a state to have something that most people don't, and that is abundant underground aquifers that even in a case of a nationwide drought, like we're in a 130-year drought right now. Here's the map, last week's map to show you. We've had the least snowfall out west that America has ever had, but in the midst of this drought, we have the capacity to produce our own food. And I think that's going to be the most important thing we do. Information's good, technology is good, and there is a way I'm sure we can coexist. But what I want to say is this: when it comes to water resources, the greatest and best use of water is to produce the food we all have to live. If we don't have that, we have nothing else. I do believe that there are ways, and technology does present ways to maximize use of water and find better ways to conserve it. But hopefully we're not in a situation where we're going to have to say it's an either or. Can we do both? Can we have this economic development and growth at the same time as we keep agriculture top priority? I'm convinced of this. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is within the next 2 decades, Mississippi and the southeastern United States will be the food supply for our entire nation. And we've got to understand that, because the water out west has dried up, California has dried up, Mississippi, we have abundant resources, we have the land, we have the water. We need to position our state to be the food supply leader for not only our state but for our country. And so I want to thank our farmers for being the most efficient in the world. And the world has a lot to learn from our farmers, but we don't want to tell them everything we know. We do it better than anybody else right here in Mississippi. I'm proud of our great farmers.
Commissioner, have all farmers in the state of Mississippi that use irrigation systems, have they implemented smart irrigation systems?
Yeah, they're smart. We have remote sensing, moisture
That's what
sensors.
I mean. They're called smart irrigation systems.
They are.
They're connected to the internet.
We have more use of
using cloud services
of moisture sensor data in Mississippi,
right. Internet of Things,
than any other state or any other people in this world. So we're on the cutting edge of that. That sensor will tell the system this soil is getting too dry. You need to kick on some water, and then it'll come out at exactly the right rate of flow and maximize the use of that water. Water equals life.
All powered by data centers, by the way.
Well,
all that's powered by data centers.
Well, that's good. I mean, I'm glad that there's a data center that's powering that technology.
Several.
Yeah.
Do the farmers in Mississippi use John Deere tractors?
Absolutely, we do.
And their entire IT workload is hosted by Amazon Web Services.
And you know what, Gerard? If you want to talk about gaining efficiency, this entire radio show, including you, could be replaced with an artificial generated
100%.
Gerard.
I'd be fine.
With deeper conversations and more knowledge. But there is value in humans being at the helm of all these technologies.
Agree.
And my concern, I share with what Pope Leo said the other day. That is, human dignity. Work is something that brings human dignity, and I do believe every person has a soul, every individual created in the image of God, and we all have purpose and meaning. And what I'm hopeful is that we can have a conversation without disparaging those who have these concerns.
Yeah.
The right answer is not to tell the people of Mississippi or America or the world you're all wrong and you're misguided. The right answer is to listen and to learn, and let's get what the facts are.
Okay.
And so when these technologies come, let's not hide the ball. I think it's incumbent on the data centers to tell the people what effect this is going to have on your water system, what effect it's going to have on your electricity, and rather than hoping that we're going to beat somebody to a race and find out we're in a place we don't want to be. So I suggest to you, efficiency is great.
Yeah.
But without real people at the helm, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the real people of this state, I think it's a concern we all fundamentally need to share, and let's find the way to do it right, to do it correctly.
Have you read the AI framework issued by the White House and the recent one issued by the governor.
I did, and finding the jobs of the future. And I do believe there will be jobs that will be created and will be enhanced. And I also believe there are good ways to find practical uses of this technology to, for example, and I've been saying this for years, bring back our local food supply. If there are ways that, if there are robotics, if there's machinery that can bring back our processing of food supply from other countries where it's been outsourced,
sure,
and we are too dependent on foreigners and foreign food. If we can bring that back, I think that's a win-win. It's a win for our farmers, for value-added processing. It's a win for our consumers, and it'll be a win for our economy to make sure we have the food supply. So, yeah. Look, I am for technology. I use technology. Farmers are masters of using technology.
No doubt.
But I think the key is, I think you would agree, we've got to find the right balance for the future of this state.
100%.
We can't make Mississippi one giant data center.
Sure.
We have to find the right balance, and there's a way to do it. The new technologies of not using groundwater. These data centers are now using gray water or wastewater,
such as AWS in Madison County.
I mean, that's the right way to do it. So you're not draining those groundwater natural resources that we have. That kind of technology is what people need to, I think, focus on and agree and find a way to strike the right balance. We cannot and we must not lose our ability to have our own food and fiber and shelter. That's the most important thing. And I believe as we look to the future, there are ways to, yes, bring more enhancements even from the technology that's developing. But my point is this. You don't want to sit in the ivory tower and tell everybody they're crazy because they have a concern. This is a global concern. It's a global issue, and I think it's a global discussion we're going to be having for years to come. And I for one, think that the answer is to let's get the information out there, the truth out there, let the people understand it, and go from there.
And one thing, of course, data centers consume about 0.3% of the water worldwide. You know, the Nissan plant in Canton actually consumes more water than the AWS facilities will. And that's been going on for 20 years. And I'm with you. We got to protect our water, and we got to have water to eat. But we need information to be efficient users of the water, and that's why we got to strike this balance.
We have
that
a limited pool of water resources. We have a limited amount of water. Water is life. Without water, there's no life. Without water, there's no you or me. And we have to be good managers. God has made us to be stewards of this, and we can find a way to do this, no doubt about it in my mind, where it does make sense and where people do come to a point to be able to see the benefits. And there are benefits. There are no doubt benefits of this technology. The issue, I think, is we've not had a comprehensive statewide look at how many of these we can sustain. How many do we need? I'm told that this is a county by county determination rally, just like solar farms. How many solar farms do we really need in Mississippi? For every acre of farm ground we lose, we'll never have that ground back again. And I'm just here to say this is a conversation worth having.
Sure.
And it's something that everybody's viewpoint, I think, is valuable.
100%.
And we need to make sure that the people are not just told to be quiet, but actually receive their input and then go from there.
But they use data centers to protest data centers. Is that a concern? I mean, we talk about it on the other side of the break. We got Commissioner Andy Gipson here in the Element Wealth studio.
Family Termite is a proud...
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge news. Huge news. Huge. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
You and me, baby, no one else we could trust.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. We're visiting with Commissioner Andy Gipson. So let's make sure, though, you and I agree that we've got to protect our precious water resources, our precious land. I totally agree with that. I want to be clear with that, and I know you do as well.
And I would add, our farmers are doing it better than anybody else in conserving our water resources.
And I take your word for that. I don't know, but I know they're using technology that's powered by data centers to do that. So
we're all using technology that's powered by data centers somewhere, and Elon Musk is wanting to put them up in outer space.
Yeah,
if he ever succeeds,
or underwater. That's another plan.
Underwater. I mean, it's a crazy development. It is very rapidly evolving.
It is.
We agree. The technology is there. It's coming. There's no stopping it. We just have to be planning and preparing and making sure we strike the right balances on all these fronts to have the benefits without sacrificing other important issues for the people of Mississippi.
We're aligned on that.
Yeah.
The good news is that we're receiving about roughly $80 billion once it's all said and done of investment in 7 sites. And that's consuming about 5,000 of the 31 million acres in the state. So that's a teeny tiny fraction, and none of it is farmland. Now, you shared with me there's been some discussions for some sites that are either on or adjacent to farmland. Yeah. That if that causes a problem, I don't support that. And I certainly don't support eminent domain for that purpose.
I talked to a farmer who feels that his farm is going to be taken by some entity somewhere, somehow, whether it's the government or the electric company or some data center, and he doesn't want to sell. He wants to keep farming. I talked to him for an hour, and I won't say where, but I mean, that's a concern. I'm just telling you that's just one of many concerns.
It's a legitimate concern.
It is a legitimate concern.
And that would be improper behavior on the part of government.
That's right, because private property is private property, and people can do and should do what they are called to do on it. So I think finding that right balance and, positioning Mississippi to take advantage of this, what I'd like to see us do is develop practical applications to reshore those food processing jobs here in our state. It's really important we do that because, as I said, we have the water that the rest of the country doesn't have. We have the food production capacity the rest of America does not and will not have, and we can actually double the state's largest economic sector, that is agriculture, by having vertically integrated processing for everything we grow and raise. I believe this technology can help us do that. I do agree with you on that. I think that is a good use of the technology that will help real people in real ways. And my concern with the whole AI, getting away from data centers so much, but the AI is, what is this going to look like for real people whose jobs are going to be eliminated? What are they going to do? As you said off air, we don't know what those jobs are going to be yet. So what do you think? What do you think the jobs are going to be? These folks who don't have a job, they're not writing anymore because AI is writing. They're not having a talk radio show anymore because they're talking. I heard a podcast that sounded so real, but I could tell it wasn't real because it was soulless. You have a soul, I have a soul. So what are the jobs of the future going to be?
I think there will always be opportunities for human creation and human innovation. Most of the time what AI is doing is just assembling and creating from what's already been created and just kind of replicating that or combining that with other creations. There's no limit, in my view, to the availability or the capacity for human innovation. God blessed us innately with that. That's what makes us different than other creatures that God made, is that ability to be aware that we're even aware.
I agree.
Is a difference.
We're on the same page on that. Absolutely.
So I don't have a roadmap. I do deeply respect Jensen Huang. He's the CEO of NVIDIA. They're the guys that make the chips that are used for all this. And I follow him diligently. And he says, AI is not going to take your job. Someone that knows AI is going to take your job. He put it that way. And I do agree with that. I think, I could go back. Let's use an example here. You may remember the days of stockbrokers, when you had to call a stockbroker to purchase or sell a security, a stock. I know you know a lot about that industry. So we don't use those anymore, right? No, but what we have is wealth managers. Yeah. That sprouted up a whole new industry. You don't call them to trade stocks and buy and sell securities. you say, here's my portfolio because of all this productivity we've gained. It's created a lot more wealth, and that's created a whole new industry. That's just a small example.
And it's going to happen. There will be new industries and jobs and skills that we don't even know about.
Not a twinkle in the eye yet.
I do not believe that this will ever replace the skill and value of human beings. I spoke to a group of tradesmen on the coast last week. And that I don't see that happening, but we need to think about that and understand this is going to be a transformational, in the same way the Industrial Revolution was. This is a revolution of another type that's going to impact our people, and we have to have the cutting edge workforce. I read Governor Reeves' AI framework last week, I think it was, or first of this week.
Yeah,
and I appreciate his focus on that. We're going to have to skill and train the next generation. The problem we have is we have too many people that don't want to work at all. And I don't know how you overcome that other than exhibiting the value of work, of real people doing real work, and we've got to keep that going.
No doubt. I believe what people want, in studies of positive, good work environments and work culture show, what people want most of all is to know that they're valued.
That's it.
You manage people, you know that nothing floats their boat more than when they produce something and it's received well. And they get praise and compliments for that. But more importantly, they see the people consuming whatever it is they produced, and it's giving them value. That's just the way God made us. That's the way they wired us. And we got to continue that.
Nothing more valuable than producing our food and fiber and shelter. If I could just give some quick statistics on the actual water usage, that the United Nations says 72% of the water in the world goes to agriculture. That is true because you have places like India with 90%, China with 61%. But here in America, only about 39% of our water is used for agricultural purposes. Another 47% is used for industrial and about 13% for municipal water. So, look, we all know we got to have drinking water, we got to have food, we got to have work to do. That's not going to change. How all this unfolds is going to be a very amazing and interesting thing to watch.
Are there opportunities, you think, Commissioner, to improve the efficiency in our use of water across all the use cases?
Absolutely there are, because and farmers are the best example of how we can do it better. They've gotten to the point of being able to tell in real time how dry that soil is, what size the hole needs to be to have the maximum water. And definitely, I think in our water systems, I heard you talk about that when I was driving.
Yeah.
I listened with interest in your discussion the other day. There are ways to find efficiencies and do it better. There always are ways to do that. But my point is this: agriculture in America and in Mississippi in particular, we are the leaders on this. We're already experts. We're doing a project right now, a pilot project on actually recharging aquifers in Mississippi, that we can take water that is excess. It's been a dry year, but when we have excess water, we can actually either pump that water into the ground or let gravity bring it back into the aquifer and recharge it.
Yeah.
And we need to do that before anybody else in this country figures it out.
Love it.
Recharge of our aquifers.
The good news is there's also massive amount of innovation in cooling technology in data centers, and also with respect to heat dissipation of the chips. Yeah. So direct-to-chip cooling. In 5 years, data centers won't need water.
They tell me that there's new technologies that are coming that will reduce the need for water. That's
already
great.
happened.
That's music to my ears, and I think would be music to the people of Mississippi's ears. Look, it's not my job to tell people what data centers are going to do, or your job either. It's the data center's job to be honest and open and tell the people truthfully what is going to happen. It's their business, and it should be in their interest to make that case openly and clearly so that people fully understand.
We just passed a set of ordinances in the city of Ridgeland, my home city, that pertain to data centers, and that's one of the requirements. I would encourage you to review that. I think it's a great regulatory framework for that does just that. Make sure it's totally open and transparent.
They're creating transparency for what's happening, and that's the Madison County.
City of Ridgeland.
City of
Ridgeland. The good news is that the city reports that the data centers that are going up in Madison County, one campus of that, of course, is in Ridgeland, it complies with all those provisions before those laws were enacted by the city government. Yeah. So that's the good news there. Look, these companies want to be good corporate citizens. They don't want to be antagonists in these communities, and I think they get cast as that sometimes. I don't see it that way, having worked closely with them whatsoever. I totally agree. We need a balance. We need both. That's the truth. Our world needs both. We got to figure out a way to do that in a way that doesn't harm our environment, our society, our farmers, etc.
And in Mississippi, we're going to have to figure out how to produce the food we need for our people before we worry about anybody else.
Agree.
And the rest of this country, because according to the experts, agricultural experts, in 20 years, the Southeast will be the food production center for our entire United States of America. That's my top priority.
I don't doubt that. Let's keep that going. Commissioner Andy Gipson, the Commissioner of Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce, has been our guest. Appreciate you coming in, Commissioner.
Thank you, Gerard. Appreciate you.
Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
From the Seabrook Days with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Oh, Mama, I can hear you a-crying. You're so scared and all alone. Hangman is coming down from the gallows, and I don't have very long.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Some good news on the crude oil front, Rhino. It's busted through $90 a barrel today. That's because Americans are optimistic, or markets in particular, about bringing this war to a close. I just don't know at this point. There's just new information breaking constantly about the situation in Iran, and it's hard to tell. But I do think that...
And now it's being reported that the early reporting on the war in Iran was not complete reporting for fear of societal backlash. Because the new reporting is that there were more people sending missions into Iran than just the U.S. and Israel. They just didn't want society going crazy that there's a regional war.
So,
because Saudi Arabia, UAE, those neighbor countries that were attacked by Iran sent self-defense retaliatory strikes back at Iran that were not reported on at the time.
Yeah, I agree. But what about this opening up the internet somewhat in the country? You've seen that, right?
Yeah, and from what I understand on that, it comes down to you're stuck with the, what did they call it, the mosaic defense system they put in place.
That's
where
right.
If the head got cut off, it just, everybody's in charge of their own little silo.
That's right.
Which has slowed down negotiations and caused all kind of headaches, but I don't know that there's been any reporting on the internet being opened just yet. I know there were reports that they were trying.
Agree.
And there were reports of
I saw the same thing.
Attacks on fast boats in the Strait of Hormuz because they were trying to lay more mines. And people are talking about, well, I thought we had a ceasefire. And yeah, there have been kinetic actions the entire time the ceasefire has been in place. It just hasn't risen to all-out war again.
But there's no clear resolution at this point. But the markets are optimistic that we're getting closer. I honestly think, again, that the economic fallout and honestly devastation that's occurring in Iran as a result of the sanctions, the strait being closed, which is prohibiting them from raising revenue from their most precious asset, of course, and that's affecting the country's economy. And there are millions of people who are suffering as a result of that. And I think even the regime is starting to, I don't know if I could say they care, because they've never shown they cared about the welfare of people, but I think they're starting to get the idea that if they don't get something going here, that I don't know. Maybe there would be some retaliation, some backlash, a revolution, a mutiny, if you will, massive dissidents in the street. I mean, they've been executing them to keep that at bay, but, they overwhelm in terms of numbers. And then it's a matter of, okay, would the guard, their military essentially, they go side with the people, or are they going to side with these few number of decision-making regime members? And that's, I think, the dilemma that they're facing in that country. I also got to point out that, give a shout-out to the commissioner. He brought us a bowl full of Mississippi-grown blueberries, and I've been snacking on those, by the way. They're extremely fresh and very tasty and good for you. And so I appreciate the commissioner doing that. And I was snacking on them a little bit while we were talking. But again, markets optimistic. And that's what I'm gauging this by. And again, it's their algorithms and all of their research that is figuring into their sentiments today. The Dow's up. The NASDAQ's down a bit, but, man, it's been on a tear lately, so no surprise there. Congratulations to Micron. They passed the $1 trillion valuation mark. The demand, of course, for silicon, for memory, which is what those guys make, off the charts. Of course, can't make enough of it to satisfy demand. And it's because of us. I just want to point this out. The main reason there's this explosion of data centers, which, by the way, currently in this country of the 3,500 or so data centers, that's across about 1,600 sites. About 20% of that compute and storage capacity is dedicated to artificial intelligence. The other 80% is just standard cloud services. And I checked out Amazon's, in the cloud services business, it's called, quite simply, a services catalog. And that is a term that represents what it is. It's a list of all the various categories of service you can buy that are all cloud services. 231. So back to my point about people being creative and inventing things, that's what I'm talking about. Because in the early days of cloud services, pretty much all we thought about was web hosting and a little bit of application hosting. Now we got 231 different distinct categories of services, from software development to software testing to application hosting to artificial intelligence, to backup services, just a huge complement, right? 231 distinct and different services. 80% of the data center capacity now all powering these cloud services that aren't specific and exclusive to artificial intelligence. Now, the artificial intelligence segment's growing, no doubt, because we figured out a way to do more with that. And I think it's kind of neat that we got a couple of very optimistic, aggressive people talking about curing cancer. Michael Dell is one of those. It's spending his own money utilizing artificial intelligence-powered data centers to cure cancer. Quantum computing will play a huge role in that, stored in data centers. We can do this in a way, as the commissioner said, that doesn't harm our environment and doesn't take our farmland, doesn't consume all of our water. And like I said, with the advances in technology with respect to heat, combination of heat dissipation and cooling methodologies, all being powered by AI, by the way, creating those technologies, we're 5 years away from data centers, modern data centers, not needing any water to augment the air cooling, and also drawing less electricity because we keep improving the efficiency of the chipsets and the chip componentry. All that's good stuff. But in the meantime, we get the value of all this stuff we all enjoy. It's embedded in every human activity, including your food, as we talked about, your health care, your banking, your education, your roads, your bridges, your clothes, every human activity. Your streaming content, where do you think that comes from? And then, of course, those who create content to protest data centers or using data centers to do that. They especially use a lot of it, as you know, when they create what we call rich content, video. images. That's why it keeps expanding, because we keep using more of it. You want fewer of them? Disconnect. Quit consuming everything, because it's all kind of, just as the commissioner said, right, this radio station, by the way, not just replacing me as a host, which if that happens, okay, I'll live with that. That'd be fine. But we're pretty connected in utilizing cloud services as well. Right? And guess what the internet is?
Anybody with a smartphone.
Yeah, that's a remote control for a data center.
Even if you don't have a single app that you've downloaded onto your smartphone, the second you open that camera up and take a picture, you're using a data center. Because the default setting is to save that picture in the cloud.
In the cloud, correct. Good point. Yep. Bubba in Starkville says, data centers are not a threat to Mississippi food production. It will help farmers. Solar is the real threat, in my opinion. And I guess I would ask the question, so are the farmers selling their land because somebody's offering them a bunch of money to install solar panels on them? And then should the government step in and say you can't do that? I don't know. Should we pass laws and say, hey, farmers, you can't sell your land? Now, I get it. Eminent domain, that's a different matter. But, I mean, a private agreement between private parties. Should the government ban that practice?
I think it could be argued that it could be regulated. But it wouldn't be regulated based on the sale itself. It would be regulated on the use. Okay. Like, for example, you couldn't take a Captain Planet villain that's wanting to dump 30,000 tons of toxic sludge. I don't think the government would be okay with anybody selling them land to dump that toxic sludge onto.
Agree.
Because of the toxification of the land. So if you're trying to regulate out the use of solar panels on farmland, you'd have to go at it from the angle of, well, these solar panels are toxifying the land.
Somebody said the farmers usually lease the land for 100 years. Okay. So, again, isn't that what our zoning laws are for? So for what you can use land for. So maybe we need to revisit that and apply it out into the rural areas, right?
Well, there's a lot of governance that could use a look at, could use a little bit of daylight because it hasn't been touched in generations.
Yeah. Coming right back in the Element Wealth Studio, final segment.
Hi. Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth Studio. Thanks so much for joining us. And look, I want you to know, I totally agree with the commissioner. We got to get all the issues out on the table. We have to have robust discussion. And he's right. We don't want to disparage people, and we don't want to dismiss or ignore them. That's what makes people mad about politics. They feel like, and in fact, it's what opens the door for disruptors and outsiders. Well, they're not listening to me. They don't care about me. They only care about their big donors. You hear that over and over and over again, or the special interest. So I agree totally with the commissioner. But I know this. We got to eat, obviously. I get it. And I like to eat as well. And we need fiber and all the other applications for the commodities that our precious farmers produce. But we also need information. And I would say, next to human life itself, information has evolved into our most valuable asset, an organizational asset. And, of course, by saying human life, that means you got to eat. We got to have the necessities of life. That's food, that's water, that's air. But my bet is on American innovation. We can do both. This is not a choice, and that's what people are framing it. You've seen this. We can either have farms and water to drink or data centers. That's just not true. That is not true. And when you look at the acreage being used, dedicated to data centers in Mississippi, there's 7. You may have heard that in the prior segment, 5,000 acres. There are 31 million acres in the state. We're not even remotely close. In fact, nationwide, the data centers, it's 0.1% of the total land for massive amount of value. And the total water usage in this country, of the total water consumed by data, actually worldwide, is 0.3%. In Mississippi, the AWS facility will use 0.001% of the water consumed in the state of Mississippi. And the good news is, using technology, just as the commissioner pointed out, our farmers have figured out a way. Like, I didn't know about degrading the land. That's cool. To more efficiently use water, right? That's neat. I didn't even know about that. But you know what's being used to do that? Geographic information systems, which are cloud-based and powered. That's fantastic. And I agree with the commissioner. Farmers, they're technologists. Who's not these days, Rhino? You go down to a car repair shop, they spend more of their time on computers than they do under the hood. They're just big computers on wheels. Modern vehicles. That's just an example. Same thing with airplanes. I don't know if you've seen now they've got these glasses that those guys wear when they're digging inside an airplane, and that's connected back to the cloud. It's got all that information, all the draw. You're shaking your head. You know exactly what I'm talking about. To fix airplanes. There's a million examples. This is human innovation serving humanity.
I actually broke down the math on groundwater usage was the umbrella I was under. And in the Magnolia State, on a daily basis, if you took all the groundwater usage across the whole state, it would be enough to cover Disney World in Orlando in 6-7 feet of water. If you look at the water usage of all the data centers in the Magnolia State combined, it's barely enough to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Yeah.
So it's disingenuous to point at water usage as a reason to be against data centers.
Agree.
If we're talking about daily water usage for the whole state, could literally flood Disney World above your head compared to an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Right.
Like, it's almost asinine to try to say that water is your reason to be against data centers.
And the data is wrong. Now, again, I'll say it as I did in the past. Putting them in the desert? No, it doesn't make any sense to put anything in the desert that needs almost any water, right? That's a problem. That's not smart. But in a state like this that's rich with water, yeah, that makes sense. There's plenty. That's the good news. And the amount being used by the data centers in this state is a tiny fraction of the total used. And the only point I was trying to make last week when I was talking about this was that there's always room for us to improve our efficiencies, be it in water or any other human endeavor. That's what we do. That's what God gave us these brains for, was to keep using our noggins to improve things and improve the quality of life. And that means conserving water. And I'm proud of our farmers for leveraging all the tools at their disposal, including these various technologies like smart irrigation systems and ground sensors, soil sensors, all of the above, using the graded land. That's brilliant. And now the commissioner, this is exciting, talking about the ability to replenish our aquifers. Man, that's awesome. Again, using technology to do that. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We're out of here today, back tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.